Symbolic learning. Culture. Finally, we come to the sort of semantic information processing unique to human beings, symbolic learning. Such learning is distinct from all other kinds in that it participates in intersubjective sociolinguistic contexts. The day a child is born, it becomes immersed in a linguistic world, a cultural Umwelt of shared words, concepts, ideas. Indeed, long before it can actively participate in this discursive world itself, a child is spoken to, sung to, made a passive recipient of conversations, symbols, social customs, and so forth. By means of these, a person will gradually learn to navigate their world through reference to shared abstract symbols. Such symbolic information is hardly the invention of just the rearing parents, of course. It predates and transcends them. Child rearers are largely passing on what they themselves learned in their own rearing and cultural immersion. Education, from the beginning, aims to initiate human beings into a transpersonal sociolinguistic world. This is called enculturation or socialization, the process by which human offspring are slowly molded into active participants within their linguistically mediated culture. The period of educational dependency lasts far longer for human children than for other animals, in large part because of the specific demands of such a learning process. During this time, children have to learn not only the kinds of sensory motor skills that other animals develop to physically navigate the world, as well as the group dynamics of complex social mammals, also the intricacies of the purely symbolic world of their culture's meaningful concepts, ideas, stories, and norms. The symbolic language that enables such mental activity moves beyond mere ostensive reference, for example, communicative signals tagged to specific phenomenal signs, such as animals might use, to an entirely new register of cognitive organization. This is marked by the appearance of grammar and true propositional claims. Not just gazelle there, but a gazelle is there. This important transition, argues Henriques, marks the advent of culture proper as it initiates the uniquely human dynamics of justification. According to Justification Systems Theory, the UTOC meta-theoretical framework for understanding the basis of the culture plane of complexity, human language's development of propositional claims opened up a new discursive space of claim and question, argument and counter-argument. With the linguistic declaration, "a gazelle is there," comes potential rejoinders. Is it? Are you sure? How do you know? For example. This development from animal communication to propositional justificatory language set off a cascade of adaptive pressures and opportunities that would radically transform the Umwelt of Homo sapiens, marking the transition from minded animals to genuinely enculturated persons. Justification Systems Theory is an ambitious meta-theory that would account for those aspects that make human beings unique from other animals by revealing how the emergence of language utterly reshaped human consciousness and meaning-making. Its three core claims Henriques summarizes this way. 1. The evolution of propositional language generated question-answer dynamics framed as the adaptive problem of justification, and this in turn shaped both the evolution of human self-consciousness and human culture, such that 2. The nature of human consciousness can be framed by the updated tripartite model that differentiates itself into three different domains: A, the experiential self, B, the private ego, and C, the public persona. And 3. Humans are transformed into persons as a function of being socialized into systems of justification, such that, relative to other animals, human persons operate in a new complex adaptive plane that can be effectively framed as culture with a capital C. Understanding these developments is key if we are to appreciate how the meaningful information processed through symbolic learning emerges out of and builds upon that of cognitive learning. So let's unpack them, paying special attention, as we do, to the meaning dynamics as they unfold. 1. Animals, we have seen, are goal-directed, aim-driven entities. Their complex nervous systems allow them to develop and store mental models of reality, physically navigate through those simulated environments, and provide the conscious animal as a whole with ongoing emotional feedback on their actions to help direct its ongoing decision-making and energetic investment. For social animals whose survival depends on successfully operating in collective groups, these cognitive learning processes are naturally extended to include mappings of social dynamics as well. Meaning becomes more indirect as survival is here contingent on attending not just to one's immediate needs and goals, but to the collective's needs and goals as an extension and support of one's own flourishing. Meaningful information now includes how to optimally navigate the behavior of other animals with their goals and intentions. Without language, though, even social animals remain completely isolated within their own individual meaning-making frame. The subjective, conscious experience of an animal's normatively directed emotional life. The intentions of the others remain opaque, gleaned only through outwardly manifested behaviors, for example, a powerful blow or a mating dance. Though mapping a social world, meaning is processed only by and for individuals through the neuronal information processing system of those individual animals. But symbolic language changes this entirely. How? By tearing down the wall isolating meaning within the mind of the individual and opening up the world of meaning to intersubjective exchange. Not just the outward behavior, but the originary, motivating, subjective meaning content of an individual mind can now become a shared object of concern. Subjective understanding and intention become interpersonal understanding and intention, as the inner world of conscious reasons breaks its confines with a single word: why. With such an advance, a cosmos of brute declarative fact learned to be interrogative, and meaning slipped the prison of the solipsistic self. Henriques writes, "Unlike chimps, language allows humans to ask and be asked about their thought processes associated with their behaviors. Questions such as, why did you do that? What gives you the right to behave that way? Why should I trust you? Force the issue. Obtaining information about what others think and what they have done, what they plan to do, is obviously important for navigating the social environment in modern times. Given that human beings have always been an intensely social species, there is every reason to believe it was equally essential in the ancestral past. So once people developed the capacity to use language to access the thought patterns of others, they likely did so with vigor." The question-answer dynamic this birthed is entirely novel to the culture plane of complexity, rendered possible by the unique nature of symbolic information processing, which is able to move between thinking agents in a way completely impossible for mere neuronal processing. Whereas genetic learning occurs at the phylogenetic level of the collective species, cognitive learning at the ontogenetic level of the individual organism, symbolic learning allows ontogenetic knowledge to move between individual and collective levels. As Henriques puts it, language-based thoughts, however, are different. This is because propositions move through the nervous system and the boundary of the skin and out into the world and back again without losing their informational form. Our capacity to share in language means that a direct highway of mental information is opened between us. Although I cannot directly share with you my subjective conscious experience of redness, I can directly share my self-conscious language-based description of redness and any other language-based thoughts I might have. Simply put, symbolic language renders intersubjective communication possible. It allows me to translate the cognitive information processing I experience internally into externally transmittable data that others can incorporate into their own learning. Justification is meaning sharing. It is made possible by the ability to transfer meanings processed through cognitive learning into an externalizable symbolic language that encodes our reasons and intentions in a manner others can decipher and engage. In the process, a novel information processing system emerges, and meaning becomes collectively linguistic. 2. Such meaning sharing, though, places a new burden on the individual, for it demands that they first be sufficiently self-conscious of their own internal cognitive processing and personal meanings if they are to properly translate them into language for others. That is, I must develop a self-reflective stance toward my own internal cognitive experience and decision-making, a higher-order perspective on my own intentions, wants, and desires, if I am to model them to others using language. With this demand, a new kind of individual had to develop, the self-conscious person. If consciousness emerged when animal value systems became integrated under a higher-order organization of a singular I that could be recursively related to itself through self-modeling, then self-consciousness emerges when that conscious totality loops back yet again onto itself to model itself through language. So out of the unreflective, experiential self is born the ego. Henrique's model of the human psyche emerges from this crucial insight. Each person has a prelinguistic subjective experience like other animals who operate on the plane of mind. But language affords us the means of rendering this experience communicable, both to ourselves and to others, in pursuance of our normative goals. Doing so leads to the production of a personal ego, which is the private internal voice continually narrating and justifying our experience to ourselves in linguistic terms. Such egos are inherently linguistic in nature, an internal narrative of self-justification continually translating raw emotional experience into the language of symbolic speech. I do not just feel hungry and eat. I think, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat something. More than that, I engage in an ongoing internal monologue of justifications in such terms: should I eat that last slice of pizza in the fridge? I think my brother was saving it, so I probably shouldn't. Then again, maybe it's not that important to him. Plus, he wouldn't know it was me. No, I'll leave it for him. He seemed interested in it. Besides, he'd definitely assume I did it, get mad at me, and then it would be a whole thing. I'll just make a sandwich. In pursuing my own goals, it is as though I have an internalized other person continually demanding justification for my actions, an enculturated voice in my head asking how my reasons and meanings mesh with the others. The stories I tell myself about myself to organize and justify my behavior, that's my ego. For many reasons, however, individuals do not communicate to others the full contents of their egoic thoughts. Individuals' goals, including maximizing social influence and prestige, are often better pursued by selectively filtering publicly communicated thoughts from privately held ones. The strategic version one presents of themselves to the world, then, is their persona. The resulting three-part conception of the human individual is less composed of A, an experiential self, the conscious animal mind, B, an ego, a linguistically mediated narrative reflection on the experiential self, and C, a persona, the self-concept one projects to others in an effort to maximize success in their social contexts. Henrique's calls this an update of the older tripartite self, meaning Freud's id, ego, and superego concept, and one that does justice to insights from both folk and academic psychology by placing all within a meta-theoretical framework rooted in the planes of complexity that have emerged over cosmic evolution. 3. The emergence of language as a means of justification, then, profoundly altered the Umwelt of Homo sapiens as the new dynamics transformed the entity-field relationship from animal environment to person-society by linking self-conscious, self-justifying egos to other self-conscious, self-justifying egos through meaning sharing. Just as animal mind represented a networking of meaning-driven cellular life to produce an emergent plane of complexity, so human culture represents a networking of meaning-driven minds to produce an emergent plane of complexity. Culture, then, is the product of many conscious animals using symbolic communication to integrate subjective information into an intersubjective world model with collective normative goal states. Indeed, this networking of shared meanings is why we must speak of justification systems. As an inherently cultural interpersonal phenomenon, justification never occurs in isolation. Just as there are no private languages, as Wittgenstein observed, there are no private justifications. Linguistic meaning sharing inherently cuts across levels and scales, with person-to-person transjective relationships embedded in micro, meso, and macro-level justification contexts. Drawing on Uri Bronfenbrenner's human ecology theory, Henrique's frames this as a nesting of more immediate local contexts within broader, more encompassing ones, with everyone bearing on the other. When we consider the sort of mind networking that is implicit in the socialization of human egos within linguistically mediated culture, then we are necessarily considering a collective, transpersonal context for human meaning formation that transcends individuals. It is the individual-sustaining group that is very much the meaning-defining entity now, similar to the way that the animal becomes the meaning-defining entity when cells network together into a multicellular organism. The cell-level meaning does not vanish, but it does shift to accommodate a broader context and serve the normative needs of a broader whole. With the emergence of culture, meaning becomes networked into a macro-level justification system that serves to orient the goals of this collective and keep it far from equilibrium. Meaning at this highest level macro scale is called a worldview. Worldviews are collective justification systems that serve to direct the normative goals of a society as a whole. From this vantage, Azarian writes, "An individual's value is not about physical ability or intelligence. It is about how one contributes to preserving the stability of the social organism we call society. By being unique or having a unique perspective that you share with others through conversation, writing, or art, you are contributing to the diversity of ideas that collectively create the world model of the superorganism. For social organisms, we call that world model a cultural worldview, which can be a religion, national identity, political ideology, or cosmic philosophy. We can make use of a metaphor by saying that the worldview is the Markov blanket for the social organism, because it is what binds the independent agents together to form a collective whole with internal states that are distinct from the external states of the environment, even though there is no tangible physical barrier like a cell membrane or an integumentary system. So just as the individual cells of the nervous system all contribute to the configuration of a world model that aids the viability of an animal in context, so individual human minds in a collective justification system all contribute normative inputs to the world model of the group. What is the biological function of a cultural worldview, asks Azarian. The worldview, like the world models that came before it, is a strategy for survival, but at this scale it is a strategy for collective survival, for the continued persistence of the superorganism. With this framework in place, we can begin to appreciate the dynamics of symbolic learning as specific manifestations of the universal learning process. For, as Azarian suggests, the value of individuals is their ability to contribute diverse and novel inputs to the collective world model. When they do, they update the model the same way the nervous system updates its model in the face of novelty and surprise. Collectives can learn, adjusting linguistic conceptual systems of understanding and justification by integrating new information. This is how worldviews evolve, transforming normative frameworks of meaning to adapt to new circumstances and information. And since the overall direction of evolution is toward more optimal flows of energy and informational complexity, worldviews of culture tend to complexify just as life and mind complexify. That is the macro-scale picture of symbolic learning, the complexification of cultural meanings, which impinge upon and influence justificatory contexts below it, all the way down to the microscale of the individual, whose ego takes shape through enculturation into the shared worldview of the group. At this level, symbolic learning is an ontogenetic process unfolding through individual adaptive interactions with the environment. Here, despite language's inherently collectivizing nature, meaning is still individual, concerned with the viability of the person in context. As the unit of culture, the ego learns to meaningfully navigate its world to achieve its normative goals as a multi-layered entity very, very far from equilibrium. The focus of the remainder of this book series will be the transformation of human meaning systems through symbolic learning. Given the inherently transpersonal nature of the linguistic medium through which it operates, this will require looking at both micro and macro scales. That is, the ontogenetic learning done by individuals and the phylogenetic learning done by the species through cultural evolution. Through ontogenetic learning, individuals generate their own slightly different world models. Through justification dynamics, individual decision-making and reasoning based on these world models becomes subject to public scrutiny and winnowed through the selection mechanisms of symbolic learning. In this way, human collectives learn to think together, cohering collective justification systems through the integration of mental information processed by its members. Individuals feed symbolic information to the collective, and the collective rears individuals by means of established symbolic information. That's what enculturation is. Through this process, mediated through individual learning, worldviews develop and human meaning evolves. These dynamics will be explored in much greater detail when we consider the individual-collective feedback cycle in Volume 3. For now, we conclude by noting that knowledge creation in the cultural world is an extension of the integrative evolutionary synthesis that describes cumulative learning at pre-cultural levels of reality. When we follow that trajectory into the plane of culture, we see that human intellectual history is the linguistic version of a knowledge generation mechanism that is driving the entire complexification of the cosmos. Meaning across scales.